She sat by the window, scrolling through her phone. 3 stops left. Then, without a word, he pulled the knife. It happened in less than 10 seconds. The footage, later played in court, shows no warning, no fight, no provocation, just a quiet young woman on a train in Charlotte, North Carolina, her headphones in, her mind elsewhere, while a man behind her leans forward and ends her life. Her name was Iryna Zarutska, 23 years old, a Ukrainian refugee. She had survived a war, crossed continents, built a new life from ashes, and yet she would die here, on an American train, thousands of miles from home. The night of August 22, 2025, began like any other along the Lynx Blue Line, the city's light rail system that snakes through Charlotte's heart. Surveillance cameras show a fairly empty car, a few passengers staring at their phones, and the rhythmic hum of the track filling the air. At 9:50 p.m., Iryna stepped in at the 7th Street station. She carried a small purse, a reusable coffee cup, and wore a denim jacket. She sat by the window, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. To anyone else, she looked like another commuter winding down after work. 4 minutes later, another passenger entered. Decarlos Brown Jr., 34 years old. He moved slowly, almost dazed. His clothes were oversized, his eyes vacant. To the untrained eye, nothing seemed particularly menacing about him. But his criminal history told a darker story: assaults, theft, probation violations, and a string of arrests that somehow never kept him behind bars. He walked down the aisle and sat 2 seats behind Iryna. For a minute, he just watched her. Then, he reached into his pocket. What happened next would haunt the city. At 9:54 p.m., Brown lunged forward, stabbing Iryna multiple times in the neck and upper torso. The attack was sudden, ferocious, and silent. Passengers screamed. One man sprinted toward the emergency button. Another tried to pull Brown away, but the knife kept flashing in the low fluorescent light. When the train stopped at East-West Boulevard Station, Brown simply stood up. He looked down at his victim one last time, wiped the blade on his sleeve, and walked off the train as if nothing had happened. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He just walked into the night. The emergency responders arrived within minutes, but it was too late. Iryna was unresponsive, bleeding heavily from her neck. She was pronounced dead before reaching the hospital. The footage spread through the local police network before midnight, and soon the city of Charlotte was in shock. A young woman murdered on public transit, randomly, without motive, in full view of security cameras. Detective Laura Mendez, one of the first investigators on the scene, would later describe the case as one of the most senseless killings she's ever seen. Her team replayed the footage dozens of times. There was no interaction, no argument, no words exchanged, just quiet and then chaos. By morning, police had identified the suspect through facial recognition. Decarlos Brown Jr. was arrested at 8:40 a.m. near a homeless shelter downtown. The knife was still on him. When questioned, Brown said little. At one point he mumbled, "God told me to." He later refused to answer further questions without counsel. Court records revealed he had been released from custody just 2 months earlier after serving time for assaulting a bus driver. Mental health evaluations had labeled him as schizophrenic and potentially violent, yet he had been cleared to live freely under community supervision. Charlotte's mayor, Vi Lyles, addressed the public that afternoon. This tragedy exposes deep cracks in our system, our mental health care, our parole supervision, and our public safety policies. A young woman who fled war should never have faced violence here. Who was Iryna Zarutska? Friends say she was full of life, a dreamer with a quiet determination. Born in the Ukrainian city of Vinnytsia, she studied English and graphic design. When Russia invaded in 2022, she fled to Poland, then to the United States, eventually settling in Charlotte with the help of a refugee sponsorship program. She found a job at a small digital marketing firm, often working late shifts. Her colleagues described her as polite, diligent, and endlessly curious. She'd bring homemade pastries to the office, one said. She had this calm energy, like she'd already seen too much of the world,
but still chose kindness. In texts recovered from her phone, investigators found a message she had sent to a friend earlier that evening. "Maybe I'll go to the lake this weekend. I miss quiet places." It was sent at 9:31 p.m., less than 25 minutes before her death. The media storm was immediate. Within 24 hours, headlines across America screamed, "Ukrainian refugee stabbed to death on U.S. train." News anchors repeated her name with solemn gravity. Vigils appeared near the east-west station, flowers, candles, small blue and yellow flags tucked into railings. Local residents demanded answers. How did a man with such a violent record end up free? Why was there no security officer on the train that night? And why did it take a death for anyone to notice? The Charlotte Transit Authority issued a statement promising increased safety measures, but public outrage didn't fade. Within days, online petitions began circulating under the banner #JusticeForIryna. In the days that followed, more details emerged. Brown's psychiatric evaluations had repeatedly warned that he was a high-risk individual prone to violent episodes when off medication. Still, budget cuts and bureaucratic backlogs left local agencies powerless to monitor him effectively. He was, as one law enforcement officer described, a ticking bomb walking through the city. Detective Mendez's team reconstructed the timeline frame by frame. From the moment Brown boarded the train to the moment he walked away, the entire murder took 4 minutes and 37 seconds. He never spoke a word. Iryna's family in Ukraine received the news 2 days later. Her mother, Olena, gave a tearful interview to Ukrainian media. She wanted peace, that's all. She wanted a safe life. America was supposed to be that. The Ukrainian government issued an official statement condemning the brutal and senseless killing and requested transparency in the investigation. Even President Zelensky briefly referenced her death during a press conference, calling her story a symbol of both tragedy and resilience. The investigation soon expanded beyond homicide. Federal prosecutors stepped in, filing charges under Title 18 U.S. Code 1992, Acts of Violence Against Mass Transportation Systems. This meant the case could carry the death penalty. Brown's defense attorneys argued mental incompetence, claiming he was unfit to stand trial, but prosecutors countered that he had acted with deliberate intent, citing his calm demeanor after the attack. One clip, widely shared online, showed him stepping off the train, folding the knife, and adjusting his hoodie before walking past a security camera. He appeared almost serene. In the weeks after the murder, the state legislature introduced Iryna's Law. The proposal aimed to strengthen oversight of parolees with violent or psychiatric histories and to fund armed transit officers on all major light rail systems. Supporters called it a moral necessity. Critics warned it could lead to over-policing of marginalized groups. For Iryna's friends, politics didn't matter. They wanted justice. One coworker, Julia Parker, put it simply, "If someone can survive a war and die like this, something is deeply broken." Detective Mendez kept a copy of the train footage on her laptop. She rarely watched it, but she said it reminded her why she did the job. You look at her, so young, so normal, just trying to live, and you realize how thin the line is between safety and chaos. By October, the Charlotte DA had formally confirmed pursuit of the death penalty. In a pre-trial hearing, Brown appeared unshaven, expressionless. When asked if he understood the charges, he whispered, "Yes." He has since been held at Mecklenburg County Jail, awaiting a full competency review scheduled for spring 2026. Meanwhile, Iryna's story traveled far beyond North Carolina. In Ukraine, murals were painted in her memory, her face against a backdrop of sunflowers and blue skies. In the U.S., immigrant communities held candlelight marches calling for reform. And in online spaces, her final image, the image from the train camera where she's sitting quietly, unaware, became a symbol of fragility and fate. Late one evening, weeks after the crime, Detective Mendez stood alone on the East-West Boulevard platform. The train still came and went, the lights flickering across empty benches. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't. She later told a reporter, "When you see something like that, someone's whole life ending in the blink of an eye. You start noticing every quiet passenger differently. You start wondering who's sitting behind them.